and will be joining us as soon as he can. So welcome. We're glad you're here. Our topic tonight is leadership development in youth. And that is one of my favorite topics because I believe that every young person that we have in our expanded learning program is able to do much more than we allow them to do. Very often, what we do is limit them. And I think that they are an amazing resource to help us in our program, to help us with the day to day routines, and to also help us in ways that are almost unfathomable. They give us feedback and information that allows us to create very strong expanded learning programs if we'll listen to them. So we're going to talk today about the importance of really recognizing that young people are an asset to be developed and not a problem to be fixed, and that we can do that by giving them leadership responsibility. So we're glad that you're here, and we'll get started with the first question. And again, Coach will join us when he gets his internet fixed. So,
Okay.
Robert, what's question one?
Yes, our first question is what are the key traits of a good leader?
So, I think there are several, but one of them is that a good leader, I believe, leads with compassion and empathy. A good leader tries to really listen with their heart as well as their ears to what others are saying to them. Because if you are leading in your mind and there's no one following you, you're not leading. You're just the person who's walking the road on their own. And so leading means that people have to want to follow you. And one of the reasons people want to follow you is because they believe that you hear them, that you understand them, that you care about them, that they matter to you. So I think that's important. A second thing is I think that a leader has to know their own true north. They have to have integrity. They have to be able to say, look, this is who I am and this is what I stand for. And I think that that's important when you think about what are characteristics of a leader. Welcome, Coach. Glad you got your internet fixed. Um, I'm sure that the group that is joining us will be glad that you're here too. And I think that they have leaders can make decisions, and they don't necessarily make them in a vacuum, but they make them by really paying attention to what's going on and what the input and feedback that people give them. So I think that in essence, a leader understands. Uh, there's a This is a title of a book by Simon Sinek. He says, leaders eat last. In other words, leaders take care of their peeps first, and then they take care of themselves. And they do that by listening and understanding and being compassionate towards them. So, Coach, I'll kick that to you. The question was, what are some key traits of good leaders?
Well, I think I'll start with so when we go out and consult, whether it's businesses or after school programs or K-12 education or anything, sports teams, you name it, what we find is that there's three things that it always comes down to and it boils down to. So one is mindset, and the second one is systems or structures, processes, procedures, all of that kind of stuff. And then the third one are the people. And so I always like to say, in regard to the New England Patriots, where they were winning all those times, I think they had a good mindset. They obviously had a good structure and systems and process and procedures, and they had the right people for a while. But then when the probably, not that I'm a huge fan, but probably the best quarterback of all time, when he left, that means the people weren't there. So that's where I'd like to be able to start that. And then I think the traits are, again, mindset. You have to start with the vision. And excuse me. And I think then what you want to do is get organized around that vision. And then from there, I think what you want to do is just do it. Right. I think a lot of times what people do is they'll say, ready, 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 or ready, aim, ready, aim, but they never fire. And so we have to fire, which is the solution showcase part of it, the Nike ness, the just do it, so to speak. And then I think from there, what we want to do is collect the data around that. What did you like? What did you not like? What are you undecided about? And then move forward accordingly. If you did something great, then celebrate. If you didn't, then ask questions about it, and try to make sure that if you really didn't like it, then pivot, do something different. And so I think that the traits, I'm not saying they're all the way where you have to be born with it. That's the big question. What are the traits of a leader? Are you born with them, or can you build them? I think it's both to a certain extent. And the last thing, I think you have to have that entrepreneurial spirit where you're going to stick to it no matter what. So I think that mindset and the stick to itness, which goes back to mindset, are the huge traits. But I also think if you don't know how to get organized, if you don't know the difference between a task and a to-do list and so on and so forth, then you're just going to spin your wheels.
I certainly agree. And I wonder, I don't know if this is a place you'd want to elaborate, but I know when you coached and you had teams that were very successful, you had kind of like a playbook. Can you talk about how that playbook can connect to leadership, right? Like as a leader, having your own playbook, if that makes any sense. And maybe this isn't the time, but I think that you did that as a leader, had a playbook.
Right. So you have a vision, and then that's the mindset, and then the playbook is going to be how you're going to organize, right? And so, for me, dealing with the younger kids, the 8th grade team, the 59-2 team, a lot of 10-0 teams and whatever. But what happened is that there happened to be, there were 3 7th graders that the previous coach felt like, well, they're 7th graders, so they shouldn't start, but they were the best, right? And so what we did is we worked on the schematics first. I do everything pretty well backwards anyway, and so everybody else wants to talk about the skill set. Well, what I did is I talked about the schematics, the playbook, and so we had like what we called amoeba, which was our press, and then we had all of our different defenses. We call it 3-2 or 32. We had our side inbounds. We had our underneath inbound. We had all of these playbooks or schematics or processes, procedures, systems, structures, whatever terminology you want to put on them. And so then if we had that mindset where, our goal was to go 61-0, and we were in shock when we went 59-2 over 2 years. We were looking at each other like, is this a dream, like a nightmare or what? So when you have that huge mindset, and then you put the structures and the schematics, the schemes around it, the playbook, as you said, and then you put the right people, get the right people on the bus and put those people in the right position, then usually good things will happen.
Okay, thank you for that. Because I think that when you have to lead an expanded learning program, you're kind of learning as you go, right? Because there's not a lot of training. There's not a lot of things that are done ahead of time. You've demonstrated that you have some natural ability, like you spoke of. And so I think having those pieces is helpful for folks.
Well, nowadays it shouldn't be like that, right? I mean, when we first started 25 years ago, I had, 200 parents going through one door, no systems, no structure. My mindset was good, but I didn't have any systems and structures. And so I have 200 parents coming through one door and 200 kids going out the same door on day one. And I was like, okay, well, that's out. So on day 2, right, we said, okay, the bus kids sit over here. The parents are going to sign them out, or, those kids will sit here. We're going to, have this bus go out this direction. This bus will go out. So we're not, having a cluster mess. And so I think that's another trait, is that you have that, stick-to-itness and problem solving as well. But nowadays, especially like with companies like ours, you don't have to recreate the wheel. We've already made all the mistakes. We can just tell you what to do now. And it 7-step process to do this, 5-step process to do that, 3 steps to do this. And then you don't have to think about all those things, which opens you up to do all the thinking in the world because you have the baseline stuff, and then you could add to the party, so to speak.
Absolutely. And I want to ask you one more question. When you talk about systems and structures, how important do you think it is for leaders they may not do it naturally, but to learn to think in systems?
Well, look, I mean, let's call it like it is. So there's 20% of the world that they don't need anything. They're just superstars. They have super talent. They have hard, work ethic. They have desire. They have talent. They have stick-to-itness. They have all of that, and there's varying degrees of that, right? And so there's the top 20%, and then you have the probably 20%. Unfortunately, I'll just stop with that. You can figure out the math on that. But then you have the 60%, right? And that's where really, no matter what happens, the systems and structures. Now, the systems and structures could help the bottom 20%, and for sure they can help the top 20%. But the masses, the majority, you have to have systems and structures to plug into. So I remember my first year coaching 8th grade football. Well, I didn't know we were in a league where there were 25 state champions in that league. And I looked at the athletes, the people, and I go, oh, we're going to kick the crap out of everybody, right? Well, we were 4th place in league in year 1. I'm looking around like, what am I, Ashton Kutcher getting punked here? Like, there's something not right. So then you develop systems. It took me about 5 years to develop the systems and the structures and the process and procedures. And then we moved up to where we got to 3rd place. That was as high as we got because the other two had been doing it for 20 years and whatever. Now in basketball, we dominated, right? Because I had the systems and structures from the very jump. We had the mindset, and then we had this amazing set of people, these kids that were, I mean, like, I'm like, oh my goodness, these guys are professional athletes in 8th grade. So it takes all of it, but if you don't have a structured system or a schematic or many of these little things that you pull together, I think you'll eventually struggle.
Okay, thank you. Because I think that those are all key traits of a leader, right? It's being a good leader isn't just a one size fits all for sure. All right, Robert, what's the next question?
Next question is, how can I identify leadership potential in youth?
So I think recognizing, first of all, do you believe that everybody could be a leader, right? Is that a possibility? I think that everybody has leadership abilities, even if they use them to lead themselves. And we all struggle with that. It's not easy to always make good decisions. It's not always easy to set yourself out on a path. It's not easy for kids. It's not easy for adults. But you have that's the first leadership level, is to, can you lead yourself and be happy at least 50% of the time with what you're doing, right? Maybe not 100%, but at least 50%. And then I think it's about, can you lead in a team? Can you step up? Can you guide a team? And then can you step up and lead and manage others? And managing is different than leading, but managing is a piece of leading. You have to be able to take care of the stuff, which is what managing does, in order to be able to lead and move the program forward. So when I think about potential, I think that every person has the potential to be a leader in one of those areas. Some of them will have the ability and the desire to be a leader over many. And so when we talk about that, we talk about that there's levels of people that are working in expanded learning. And there are the frontline friendlies, right? They're the people who deal with kids every day. And maybe that's as far as they want their leadership to go. They want to do a good job of being a mentor and a role model for 20 kids a day, every week. Other people say, after they've done that for a while, I'd like more. I want a bigger classroom. Because when you lead, in my opinion, you just get a bigger classroom. So when you become a site coordinator, you have a bigger classroom. It's not 20 young people that you are leading. It's 100 young people and 5 adults, or 5 times that, or however it works in your program. And then if you want to lead beyond that, even less direct impact, but you want to lead and have a bigger classroom, then you might become a grant manager or a project director. Because what happens is that your classroom gets bigger and bigger. And then if you want to be a business owner or an entrepreneur, then it's even bigger still. So I think that we have to recognize that everyone has the potential to lead themselves, and then give them opportunities to try that out. And I think the way that you know if they can, or you recognize it, or you see if that's something they desire to do, is by giving them opportunities to do different things. And if they continue to say, not me, I don't want that, they're telling you, I'd like to just stick in this realm of leading myself. So that's how I would answer that question. How do you recognize potential? So, Coach, how about you?
Well, I got a lot to say about that, and I already said a bunch on the last one, so sorry, everybody. So the first thing, yeah, can you lead yourself first? I 100% agree. That's the first thing that came to mind. Then what I would do is say, can you lead a partner, right? And so you can put the blindfold on them, and can you lead the partner without having them crash or whatever, right? Now that's a little bit more directy and telly, but at least you can see whether they have the ability to be able to do that. Then you go to a small group, then you can divide up the group in half and then let them do a large group. And I think about you in particular, which you used to carry me around basically on your lap when I was a little kid, and you were doing 6th grade. And obviously you could lead that class, but then you started leading the whole school in different things, and so it went from a class, and then you were doing drill team, then it was the whole school and an assembly. And then one of the greatest things I'd ever seen, and still to this day, was when you did Color Me Beautiful at the largest, 20,000, people stadium that we have in Bakersfield. And I thought, geez, even as a little kid, I thought, geez, Minnie Crackers, this is amazing. And how do you get all these things to be able to come together? So, for you, that was your progression. Just like for me, it started with 16 special day kids and 1 adult. Then it became 1,000 PE kids and 5 adults. Then it became 1,000, PE kids, 5 adults, and then 16 adults in the after school program, another 500 kids. Then it became the program manager where I had 223 adults and served 10,000 kids. And now we've served over 50 million kids, and we've served over 10 million adults. Right. And so when you look at that, and you made the best saying that I've ever heard. So I remember when I was struggling with that, when I went outside the educational field into the financial services business, I was like, man, this is weird for me because I like teaching. And she said, I don't think your purpose and passion has ever changed, which is that you want to teach and educate and so on and so forth, but your classroom had. And so, GMA said, your classroom used to be the 16 special day kids, so on and so forth. And then it was, in the financial realm for a spit in the ocean. And then I went back into the after school programming, portion of it. So sorry to be long winded, but that's my first couple thoughts. Secondly, I remember my mom saying this, GMA, this was back in the day, where she said that she was looking around, there was like 40, 50, 100 people in there. And she just happened to look around. She was leading the group. My younger brother was leading the group, and I was leading the group. Now, again, is that built in? Is that environment? Is it circumstances? Is it because we watched GMA do that for all her time? I don't know, right? And I can make a good case either direction for that. Last thing I'll say, sorry to be long-winded, everybody, is let them try it. So I had a 5th grade basketball kid who stunk it up in practice. She was terrible. And so I put her in the game. I was going to give her like 2 or 3 minutes, and she scores like 16 points. Well, anybody that knows anything about girls basketball that's elementary, if you score like 16 points, you win the game. And she scored 16 on her own. So I brought her over and I said, what's your deal? Like, I don't understand. She said, I just don't like to practice. So that's another thing, is that they may not be bringing out the leader in themselves because they're like, it's just not my thing. But then you put them in that role where they have to perform, and it can be absolutely phenomenally amazing.
For sure, for sure. Potential just jumps right out, doesn't it? Sometimes you go, whoa. All right, Robert, how about the next question?
The next question is, what are effective ways to teach decision making skills?
So decision making is a process, and it has steps. And if you follow those steps, then that's the science of it. The art of it is different. But if you understand the science, I think it makes decision making easier. So the first thing I think you have to do is identify what your decision is that you want to make. What is it you're trying to solve or resolve or fix, right? A lot of times we're not clear on that. So we go ahead and we do this decision making process, and we get almost finished and we go, uh-oh, I made decisions around something I didn't really want, because we haven't gained clarity around what is it you're trying to make a decision on. So I think that takes time sometimes to do. You have to go slow to go fast, but you have to really know what it is you're trying to decide. The second thing I think you need to do in this process is to brainstorm with yourself and others what are possible, what would make a good decision. If we were to get lucky to make a good decision, how would we know it? What would we want it to accomplish? And that goes hand in glove with, this is what we're trying to solve, and this is how we'd know if we solved it. Then I think you brainstorm again and you go, okay, what are all the possible things we could do? And you try very hard not to dismiss something because it seems silly or it seems impossible. You put all those things in the table, and then you go back and you ask yourself, of all of these things we could possibly do, what will meet the criteria we set for making a good decision? And you're looking at things about, what do you need? What do you want? And what would be a nice to? And you try and figure out which of those things you've brainstormed will give you the most needs to be satisfied. And once you've done that, then I think you have to make a plan to implement your decision. If you went the right way or not. But I think that there's a process, and I think that's the science of decision making. And then I think there is an art to doing that and doing it well. So Brett, I'll push this to you.
Well, it's funny that you said that. I listen to a lot of, I tell everybody I got this echoic ear, like a photographic memory. So I can work 12, 14 hours a day at my desk on certain days, and I'm listening. And so in a podcast, they were talking about that. And so Boeing, the big airline company, they took 4 years to build this big old plane, and they tried to get it all perfect. And this is not funny, but it is funny. And it blew up. So they perfected every little thing, and then when they sent it on a test, it blew up. Now, I don't think it hurt anybody. I don't know this full story. But then there's Elon Musk, who just goes and does it, right? And he's already on Mars. And so the point of the matter is, if you guys have ever watched Collateral before, the movie, the moral of the story is Tom Cruise comes in and he's a hired gun, and he just whacks people, right? And so he just comes in, bang, 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 bang. And then there was Jamie Foxx, who's this taxi driver who is building this 7-year limousine business. And, he never gets to it. But at the end, what does he do? He just goes out and tries it, and it's either him or Tom Cruise at the end, and he has to do this guy in. He just does it. And so I think when you were talking about that, that's a big deal. Number 2, discernment's tough, right? Like to try to teach people to be discerning on how to make good decisions or not. that's tough. But I do think that that it's possible to do. I think you start with role modeling that a lot. I know with my own kids, they're pretty good at least half of them are at decision making and different things of that nature. And then I like what you said, going back to systems, do a pros and cons list, reflect on past decisions, so on and so forth. And so I thought you kind of hit the science part of it.
Right. And would you say when the art of it happens with practice?
Well, I look at it and I think that what I count as art is you either come with it or you don't, but you can enhance it. But I think that a lot of it, like, I could throw a football 70 yards. I can't screw a screw 2 inches. Now, could I probably learn how to screw a screw 2 inches? And obviously I'm exaggerating, but you get the point. Yeah. And it's my best. If my art, if I did the best I could, have the greatest mindset and structures and systems, and I got trained and all that, I'd probably be a 7. That's it, 7.0 out of 10. But because I just don't have that kind of talent, as you and I've talked about many times, I have spatial talent. I can put stuff in spaces, and it's like, and Robert can attest to this. I pull it out for the garage sale, and it looks like it's in this little cubicle, and it's like my whole garage plus the driveway plus 3-car garage, it's just stuff everywhere, and then I put it back into there. So I think that yes, you can improve. The other way I would say that is this. So we believe that we can help anybody, if you're a toad, to be a super toad. And we believe that if you're a baby eaglet, we can help you to be a full-grown eagle. So yes, we can help either way. But if your art isn't just quite there, if I don't have the ability to be a 7-foot high jumper, and I'm currently jumping at 5 feet, we can teach you how to get to 5'8", maybe 6 foot, but you're never going to be a 7-footer.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Robert, something new.
Yes. Our next question is, what role does teamwork play in leadership development?
I think we talked earlier about leading yourself first, right? And then leading a team. But there's such a difference between being in a group and being on a team. A group are people who get together and they may or may not have totally common interests, but they're okay together, and they come and they mess around, but they don't really drive forward. A team is a group of people who are all rowing in the same direction. And a lot of times I think we have a team, and what we have is a group. And so we really want to have a team, everybody pushing towards the same thing. So if you're a leader and you have a team that's trying to move in the same way that you're moving, it makes moving easier. It makes it smoother. It makes it more meaningful to reach further. And it's not that you can't do it by yourself, but with a team, it has a broader impact. And I think that sometimes we think of leadership as having to impact tons and tons of people and tons of things. Whereas you might be a leader within your organization or within your team, and people are willing to follow you. But I think that having a team means that you have somebody who's following you, somebody who says, I want to go where you're going. I appreciate the way you're leading, and I'd like to go with you. So I think that that's why a team is important in leadership. Good followers matter. So, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's big, right? I mean, I've coached many teams, and if they can understand the mindset of team first, come together as one, common goal, rowing together, however you want to be able to say that, then that's a big deal. And, GMAW says many times, which is true, with the team, as you're building a team throughout a season, they hit the cathartic moment, and you can just tell. You don't need to talk about it. You're like, okay, And that means that they really, really care about each other. They care about the success of the team. They will do anything for the team. And these are when you get these championship teams like the Eagles. I mean, they were talented last year for sure, but they came together as a team. And I remember that a lot of their head guys didn't like their coach at first. And so the coach went back and really looked at himself and started figuring out how to be able to do that. And so now when you're talking about the leader, especially, they're going to do anything for that guy because they want to make sure that leader's successful. On the 59-2 team, I laugh. It's not that funny. It was crazy. So we lose the game, right? So we were whatever it was, roughly 30-1 the first year, and we were 30-0, or do the math on that, you get the point. And my best shooter, who was amazing, I told him, when you get off the bus, you can start shooting. I said, when you cross over the timeline, you can start shooting. Well, he had a terrible night. If he would have just been at 50%, we would have won by 8. Well, he comes up crying to me. I'm sorry, coach, I let you down. I said, bro, you didn't let me down. Did you give it your all? Yeah, I gave it my all. Did you give it your all the whole season? Yeah, I gave it your all. I said, have you scored 30 points in a game? Yes, I did. I said, don't worry about it. This isn't about me. But that's what you want, right? As the leader, is you want somebody that'll flat go to war with you, because there's going to be tough times within that team, and there's going to be arguments and different things of that nature. I know we were talking the other night. We do our Sunday gatherings. One night we'll be over at my house, or Sunday night, and then the next Sunday we'll go to GMOS. And we were talking about that exact thing, right? That as a family, you're going to do things, even if you're mad or upset or angry, for the common good that you wouldn't normally do. And so that's the hope for each leader.
Right. Will you also share with them? I think that I won't say it right, and I don't want to say it. I want you to say it. But about when somebody asks you about a program, if it's working.
Yeah. So that people, because we've been in the kid business for a long time. Like I said, I've been on my mom's hip when she was, very young, and I was very young. But people come up and ask us all the time, hey, should I take my kid to this YMCA program? Or should I take my kid to this Girl Scouts? Or should I take my kid to this sporting outing? I go, I don't know. Let me interview the leader. Right? Because, there's great YMCA coaches. And there's terrible YMCA coaches. And there's everywhere in between. There's great principals, right, that are after school site coordinators. And there's the opposite of that. So I don't know. I need to go interview them and talk to them. And then I could tell you I could probably tell you as they walk up to me now, because we've done it for so long. But if I talk to them or if I see them work, I'll be like, yeah, you definitely want to put your kid there. And then we have the other litmus test that Gma and I used to say, now she gets to say her grandkids, but back in the day, would I put my kids in that program? Yeah. Right? And if the answer is no, then that's not a good enough program. So, and she says that with her grandkids now, right? And so we have all these tricks and stuff that we do to make sure that people can understand where it's at. But it always comes back to those same 3 principles: mindset, systems, and the people themselves. And one little thing on the people, I had an 8th grade boy that was, he's playing football for me. And I go, dude, come here. He comes up. I go, you're a fullback. He goes, what's a fullback? I go, just run to the right on this play and just try to knock down whoever is in the way. And so he did. He just crushed this poor little kid. And he comes back and I go, that's a fullback. Right? And it's just one of those funny things. The fullback, blocks the guy, so the running back doesn't have anybody that's going to tackle him or pull flags or whatever. So I think that, these are the things that we have to be able to put out there as a leader.
Absolutely. And they wanted to follow, right? Good leaders have people who follow. All right, Robert, you're up.
Yes, your next question is, how can I help youth develop confidence as leaders?
I think you develop confidence by doing.
Throw them in
When
the
you're,
deep end.
but I missed that.
I just said throw them in the deep end. If they pop out and swim to the shore, they teach somebody else to do it.
Exactly. But you do it, you learn to do it by doing it, right? And know that it's not going to go well. I was working with a group of people today, and we were talking about a strategy for having a conversation with a child who'd made a poor decision. And they said, that's so hard to do because I just want to tell them what to do, right? Rather than ask questions. And I said, I understand that. And I said, it will not go easy the first time you ask questions. It won't even go easy the 10th time. But by the time you've put in your 10,000 hours, as Malcolm Gladwell says, as when you've put in your time and you've reflected on how did it go, what did I like, what did I not like, how can I pivot, how can I change, then you will be able to move forward as a leader. But it is, you make endless mistakes. You misread, you misjudge, you think, but you didn't confirm, or you thought you confirmed and they didn't, but that's not how they saw it. However that is, uh, it's challenging. And so what you want to do is try it and then debrief with them so that and talk to them. Okay, now what will you do next time that will be different than the time this time? So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, this is tough. So, probably 95%, but I'll say 90% of the time, whatever I would say, I do myself. But it's like I tell my own kids, I go, 10% of the time, I'm going to tell you what to do, even if I don't do it well, right? I have my flaws and different things of that nature. And I think that that's the same thing when we talk about confidence in leaders, right? Let's role model that out, but also let's be very specific in nature to the feedback we give them. And so we have a thing that we call Greg versus gross. And so if we give gross and gratuitous feedback, well done, good job, stuff like that, that's not any good. So Greg Louganis, who's one of the best all-time divers in the history of the world, and for sure in America, he didn't have that from his coaches. If they said well done or good job, something gross and gratuitous, he would walk right up to them in the middle of their grill and say, you tell me specifically exactly what that is that I did. So I think if we're telling them specifically, this is what you did in a mindset, this is what you did that was part of a process, this is what you did that you're talented at, right? Going back to that trifecta of mindset and structured systems and the people, I think that's very important. This one I don't do. That's kind of the 90-10 rule, but we have it as a rule, but we're always blowing and going so much we don't do it as much as we should have. Celebrate the wins, right? You can teach them. It's great if you celebrate it, but big deal. You're not going to be with them. And when Gma was talking about that, I just want to tell them what we always say to them. Well, do you plan on, being hooked up to them like a Siamese twin? You're going to be glued to their hip for the rest of their life. And if so, then go ahead and correct and tell them and just tell and tell and tell. But the reality is you're not going to be there with them. And so what you want to do is teach them to make those decisions. And in the process, you're going to give that very specific Greg Louganis, type feedback. Another thing that I don't know if I do it as well as I used to. We don't have a big team that I work with. Gma works with the bigger majority of the team, but praise in public and reprimand in private, or the 30-second praise and the 30-second reprimand. We got that from a book as well. So, right, because it's okay. It's like I tell my organization, look, if all you want to hear is the greatness of what you're about, then you're in the wrong organization. We're going to tell you the great stuff. We're going to tell you the stuff that's not so great and that needs to be improved upon. And in the middle, you need to figure that out on whether you think it's great or something that needs to be worked on down on the other end.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned, so thank you for that. But when you mentioned Greg, the Greg or the gross, I had that exact conversation today with them. And they said, because we talked about what do you say, right, to kids? Well, good job. Well, that's gross, right? It's not helpful. They don't know what you want more of. So I think that that's so important as a leader.
See, systems work. See, we have systems that we plug into, and that's part of our what we call our weighted warfare system, right? We have all these touch points that we plug people into, like gross and grade, and that's what we do. And it just makes it really easy because, as you guys know, and we've talked about many times on this podcast, who's the greatest teacher in the world? Well, probably Jesus Christ. No offense if somebody doesn't believe that, but how he taught in parables and what we call touch points, quotes, metaphors, different things of that nature. So again, this is where you can plug them in. So no matter what their art or their talent level is, they can always raise up to a certain point to where they're maximizing whatever their potential is.
Absolutely. So, Robert, do we have returning folks on tonight? Do we have who are we talking to?
Yes, right now
We lost you.
sorry about that. Yes, right now we have 5 viewers on YouTube, and then we have 7 on TikTok. I'm not sure if they're returning, but I did write a note letting them know they have any questions. They're returning to write their emails, and we'll send something to them of tonight's podcast.
Absolutely. Be happy to send some tips, leadership tips, levels of leadership that we can share with you. That be happy to send that to you with an email. So if you're returning, thank you for doing that. If you're new, thank you for coming new. We appreciate it either way. So, Robert, a question.
Yes. Our next question is, what activities teach problem-solving skills?
Problems, right? That's kind of a facetious response. But I think that when you talk about problem solving, one of the things that you want to do in order to solve a problem is to do critical thinking. And critical thinking means dissecting, taking the problem apart, looking at all of the pieces that are included in this problem or challenge so that you really have an understanding of what's going on. So once you've pulled it apart and you've identified the pieces, then what you want to do, if what you've had as a problem, is to put the pieces back together differently and maybe remove some pieces or leave them or add some pieces if you take some away, or add them even if you don't take anything away. So I think in order to teach problem solving skills, kids need to have conundrums where there's not a right answer, but there are multiple right answers. They could make a choice and they could go right or left or straight ahead or any of the directions in between. And a lot of times I think when we look at challenges, we look at them as a right or a wrong. And I think that that's maybe not as helpful because most things, there are some things that are just that straight. It's right or it's wrong. But many things are, it's a conundrum. If I went this way, I would benefit in these ways and I would lose in these ways. If I went this way, I would benefit in these ways, but I'd lose in this way. And so teaching kids to make decisions through conundrums, I think is important. And I think you also need to teach them to infer, because an inference is when you don't have something stated specifically, but the evidence tells you that that's the way it's leaning. So I think that when we work with solutions, helping kids to problem solve, we need to realize that there's a lot that goes into it. You have to take it apart. You have to know what the parts do. You have to know where you want to go and do the parts that you have. Will they get you there or not? And realize that there's probably not a single, in most instances, a single only decision. So that's what I would say as far as decision making. So, Coach?
Yeah, so I always say begin with the end in mind, or start what are you really trying to accomplish, and then reverse engineer that So I had about of the 223 employees, there were probably 90% of them that were young women that were going to be getting married. And so that's the touch point that I always use. I said, let's start with, your honeymoon. Okay. And then what do you need to get ready for your honeymoon? And then, and then we just kept going backwards. Okay. Then you have the wedding, then you have the rehearsal dinner, you have, we just kept going backwards. And what are the things that you need to be able to get to brainstorm to get situated? So I think that if you identify the challenge, or in this case, uh, it's not a bad thing or a negative thing. It could be a good thing as too. So I don't want to say it's just a challenge, but in problem solving, typically that's going to be a challenge. But I like to tell people this because sometimes they think, well, this can only go towards a challenge or negative. I'm like, no, it can go to positive things too. But anyway, I'll get off that soapbox. But you reverse engineer it, you backwards plan, you begin with the end in mind. And so just like GMA said, the process is you identify the challenge, you brainstorm solutions or maybe double brainstorm the solutions. Then what I say is draw from, making sure that you're drawing from your past experiences and circumstances. If you can't understand what to do because you have nothing to grab a hold of, we're going through that a little bit with AI, then ask somebody. I used to call my mom all the time when I was first teaching. And I remember the one kid, I kicked him out of the class, which I didn't do very often because I just dealt with them. I call their parents or whatever. We get on the same page. And the knucklehead AP sends him back with a behavioral note in the middle of my class. Well, what happened is the previous AP knew that if I sent them, they were probably even going to be sent home because she knew I just never did that. So then the AP came around and gave me the behavioral note. So I called my mom, and this was after like 5-7 years, and I didn't call her as much. And I said, hey, this knucklehead did this, da da da. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. What should I do? And she said, quit sending them. And I thought, yeah, that's right. So I never sent anybody back to him. I just always dealt with them no matter, how difficult it was. And I thought, well, that's pretty simple. So I think that, if you don't have these experiences, just like if you don't have money for a car, what do? You go to the bank and get a loan. So if you're not there yet in your experiences or circumstances, there's somebody out there that is, right? And so in my case, it happened to be GMA or, my mom, so to speak. But yeah, I think that's, and then you collect the data at the end, like we talked about earlier, and then you do what we call downright diagnostics. What did you like, dislike, and what are you undecided on? And if you're undecided, you ask questions. If you like, you should celebrate. If you dislike, adjust or pivot. That's the process to be able to do that. So if you teach them that process, then they just run around doing that all day long. I'm sure that I drove my mom crazy solving this problem and solving that problem and telling her that my fourth grade teacher maybe needed some help. And, I'm sure it drives, as a kid, it drives the adults crazy. But like my mom said, you drove me crazy as a kid, but you wound up being an okay adult. And that's what we're doing. We're training them. This is the practice ground for the real world for them.
Yeah. We're not working so you'll be the perfect 8-year-old, right? Because you only get to be 365 days. But if you count adult, being an adult, not a grown-up, but an adult starting at 18 where you're making good decisions and you live to 98, that's a bunch of years that you can practice being an adult. And so we're always working towards that. And I do think that we limit. I just need you to be a good third grader, and then you can move on and somebody else can worry about you after that. And it's like, no, we need to be working on those things all along. So I think, Robert, we probably have time for one more question, maybe two, but at least one.
Okay. Yes. Our next question. Last question is, how can I teach youth to communicate effectively?
Good luck to you. Uh, Communication sounds so easy, but it's not. And so I just want to talk about a communication cycle, and then I'm going to push that to Brett because he has a lot of very practical things he can talk to you about as far as communication. But communication begins with you having a feeling that comes up in you that you want to share. Because there are lots of times when you have no desire to communicate because nothing's happened inside of you that you think you ought to bother to share it out. But you bring it up, and when it comes up, you have to take that feeling and you have to put words to it. And sometimes the words come very easily, and other times you struggle to try and get just the right words. And then you speak those words. Once you've spoken those words, they no longer belong to you. They're not yours anymore. They belong out here in the universe. And what we like to think is, well, I said it, and they go directly to the other person's ears and they hear it. That's not true. They go into this set of circumstances, their lived experiences, how they're feeling today, what happened that you may know nothing about. It goes, your words go in there and it mixes around. Then it goes to their ears. And then their ears take it to their brain and they start to translate it. And then it comes down to a feeling. And I'm sure that you've all experienced where you've said something that you think is benign, something that's not going to be a bad thing for anybody. And the look on the other person's face says to you that they didn't appreciate what you just said. And so you start, hey, I didn't mean that. I didn't want to offend you, blah, blah, blah. But what happened after those words left your mouth is they went into circumstances, into their brain and down, and it happens in a nanosecond. It's not like it's this thought through process. And so one of the things I like to say to people is this: I'm going to say a single word, and I want you to make a picture in your head. Okay, you ready? Mother. Okay, so I'm sure that you all saw what I saw, which was a woman who walked to my bus to walk home with me every day over a half a mile and carry my books and talk to me about what my day was. And then when I got home, she fixed me a snack. That's what you thought, right? And you're going, no, I didn't ride a bus. I didn't, none of that happened. That's because that word means something completely different to all of us. And that's true with a lot of the words that we speak. They mean something different. And so in this communication cycle, you bring it up, you say the words, you send them out, it goes into circumstances, into their ears, into their heart, into their feeling, and back. And that communication cycle happens very quickly. And there are many, many places where it can go this way. So learning to communicate and check in and decide, hey, what do you think I said, is really important, because they may not have heard what you intended. They interpreted your words differently. I read an article one time that said, nobody ever read the book the author wrote, including the author if it was a year later. So communication is tricky. So Brett, you have some real practical things, I think, to say about communication.
Yeah, but I want to piggyback on what you said. So Robert, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to respond to it. You may have heard this one before, but I know GMA has, so it won't be as effective. The little boy was afraid to run home because the man in the mask. So what did you think about there?
I'm thinking the little boy is afraid of, it's a stranger danger.
Okay. And so everybody's going to have a different thought, right? It could be Halloween. It could be a robber, like Robert said, right? It could be a thief. It could be, right? It could be somebody's going to hurt them. But in
Yeah.
this case, it was just the kid had never went home before rounding third base in baseball, right? And so, yeah, so when we put it into context, what she's talking about, that's where we're at. And just to let you know, when we talk about that communication cycle, what I always say too is when it goes from your heart, through your brain, out your mouth, everybody goes, I trick them. I say, where does it go next? They go into that person's ears. I'm like, no, it goes into circumstance. then to their ears, their brain, whatever. And I said, as an example, let's say I was so excited, and man, we're gonna have a luau, and everything's great. And man, Cindy, I want you to go, and gee, well, we're gonna have fun. Yeah, we're gonna roast a pig. Da da da. What about if you're kosher? What about if you're Jewish and you don't do pig? Then that's a different type of circumstance for you, right? So we have to be aware of that when it comes to communication to begin with. I mean, I've been with my wife 43 years, and sometimes I can go, hey, get this of the each and that, and she'll go and grab my chap stuff, right? The car meds. And other times I feel like I'm being very clear in communication. Hey, I need for you to do this on this day at this time, which I never do, but you get my point. And she's like, brings me a water, and I'm like, how did you get water out of that, right? And so if you think about the telephone game, when you're a little kid, it starts off as a blue giraffe on Tuesday and it winds up being a yellow monkey on Wednesday. You're like, how does this happen? Well, it's because we don't communicate very well. And so what we have to do is to be able to start with their style. Jesus Christ, meet them where they're at. Remember, he didn't sit in the synagogue and be like, yo, come here, brothers and sisters. No, he met people where they're at. So are they an audio person? Are they a visual? Are they kinesthetic? They have new stuff that's coming out now, right? But that makes it tough, right? If we're just walking by each other and we're communicating and your style's not auditory, we got a problem. Because if I go blah, 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 and I say 25 things, you may or may not pick up any, let alone one. So, but what are you going to do? Walk around with your Post-its in your hand? I do. If that's what needs to happen, I'll listen and I'll write it down. So I just think that there's all of those types of different things you have to consider, but meet them where they're at with their style. So, I know most people are visual, so I'm going to try to do it with a whiteboard, or I'm going to talk with my hands or do different things of that nature. Also, on the other side, we don't talk about kind of like the bully triangle. We forget to talk about the onlookers. We talk about the bully and the victim. But one of the things is practice active listening as the person. Shake your head, go like this. You'll see me do that with Gma. Sometimes I'm thinking, right? I'm pointing to my brinks. I'm thinking about what she's saying or different things of that nature. But I think practice active listening is a big deal. And then you can just role play the different styles to be able to help them.
All right. So, Robert, I think that's taken us to 7 p.m. So
Yes.
those of you who are listening, if you'll hand us your email, we'll be happy to send you some information about developing leadership in young people. And we're happy that you're here. We hope you join us next week. And thank you for coming. And take good care and have a great rest of your evening and your week.